my theories hold up with whatever new elements the team have added. But we'll see about that when we cross them, I suppose. But anyway, keep an eye out for the change in the cutscene, and we'll talk about that change during the battle. And here are the two gargoyles perched above the undead church. This was the trial that the pilgrims of Astoria had to complete in order to ring the bell of awakening. And there, during that cutscene, when the gargoyle screams at the very end, we see the image of the ring of the evil eye. But before I get to all that, I should cover everything else first. There is a few things to note about the design of this particular gargoyle. Firstly, this creature has a tail weapon, meaning it is connected to an everlasting dragon or one of its descendants. Also note the tail weapon is a Labrys axe, the symbol of Astoria, and that this creature wears an ornate mask and has beautiful detailed scales on the top of its wings. These decorations are trying to hide the creature's true nature. This is Velka, as she was after she had reversed her hollowing by eating the sinners of Astoria. And here joining the battle is a gargoyle, much smaller, much weaker, and with its wings broken. This is Menace. Notice he doesn't have a tail weapon either, who has to follow Velka around like a pet or a dog. Also notice some slight feathering on the gargoyles below the wings. This links Velka to the first army that marched under the banner of the eagle in the first war against the everlasting dragons. Velka, with Menace as her consort, had inherited the army of men and giants, as these were the heroes that had become so overwhelmed with dark. And back up we go, and as we do, I'd like to talk about one of my favourite characters in Dark Souls. So far, the story elements we have talked about are double entendres. They have two meanings. Knight Lordran is a symbol of Gwyn, but he's also an important character in his own right. The same is true with the Gaping Dragon, Pinwheel, Witch Beatrice, all of those characters we've discussed so far. The gargoyles at the top are different, though. They are literally symbols. They are in fact an art installation commissioned by Priscilla or Gwyn. And this art installation is created by a character who is only named once in the game, and that is in a strange crossbow called the Evelyn. It is a crossbow which fires 3 bolts in an awkward manner, and it is made by a weaponsmith named Idas. And the piece is stated to be more art than weapon. And that's what has happened with the gargoyles. We have a pair of weapons that are more art than weapon. Idas understands what is happening in Astoria, and he uses his art to express his misgivings about the whole situation, the pilgrimage, the trial, the ringing of the bell of awakening. And so he creates this art piece where he has the great blacksmith Menace, who Idas would have respected, shown broken, weak, and limping around behind Velka, a powerful, dangerous beast who wears a crown and a mask to hide her vicious appearance. This is Idas commenting on the state of the world in the era of Astoria, and it is also a warning to the pilgrims who reach this point in their journey, a hidden message to tell them that things are not right. And that's why I love the character of Idas. I like the idea of a character who travels the world and places pieces of artwork here and there to try to make commentary on the things that are happening and the things that he sees. Returning to the symbols of Astora, the materials that armor the gargoyles look silver but are in fact rusted bronze, which is information in the item descriptions of the helm we just acquired. And Idas chose bronze as this was the original metal used in Astora. Remember how the binoculars, a symbol of menace in that time, were made of brass? They are made of brass because it is a more advanced version of bronze. It is harder to make and has more advanced properties than bronze. Metallurgy is used by the creators of Dark Souls to show progression through time, particularly for menace. Bronze gives way to brass, which gives way to iron after menace leaves Astora. Solaire of Astora has an armor set which is made of iron, showing he comes from a later period than when menace was in Astora. And why is the bronze rusted? It is rusted for effect. Idas purposefully rusted the armor and gave the gargoyles halberds and shields with the full moon on them to show the divine protection Priscilla gives Velka, the Queen of Astora. And why is the bronze rusted? It is rusted artificially for effect. Idas rusted the armor of the gargoyles, gave them halberds and shields with moons on them to show the divine protection Priscilla gives Velka, the Queen of Astora. The halberds come in two forms in Dark Souls, the scythes and the actual halberds. And the difference between the two is the same as the difference in the Elder Futhark runes that we discussed a long time between the two of them. We have Thorazaz, which means physical protection, like a barrier or a wall, and Aljiz, which means divine protection, the protection of the gods. The scythe is the red tears of Priscilla, her ability to do physical damage as an assassin, her ability to protect things physically. The halberd are the blue tears of Priscilla, her ability to bring wide-reaching, divine protection to Lordran. And notice how Menace's gargoyle does not have that shield. He does not have the protection of Priscilla. And that was the battle with the gargoyles. And we should talk about the new addition to the cutscene. But before that, just quickly, note that the gargoyle drops twin humanities. The gargoyle is pregnant. This is a nod to Velka being pregnant with Manus' child. It's also a nod to the idea that the constructs, which the gargoyle is one of, can have children just like any other race. And it also is how this trial is even practical in the First Age of Fire. Somewhere in Lordran there was once a gargoyle farm. And when this trial needed to be reset, 2 gargoyles would be fetched from the farm and put in place atop the undead church. The Ring of the Evil Eye being in the cutscene at the point with the scream says to me that the ring is the birth of the Caduceus. The birth of the Beast of the Evil Eye, even though it looks quite grisly in Dark Souls 3, is actually a cathartic act. It's a healing act. When a person becomes overloaded with dark, it can be expelled and thrown out into the world as a Caduceus, lightening that person's load. The scream always represented many things: a warning to the pilgrim who approached, an expression of Velka's fierce dominating presence over the land, and now it represents Velka's primal scream. Her scream at her world being destroyed by Gwyn, and her expelling of the Caduceus, the dark that had built up within her. And here we are on top of the undead church, and here is the first bell of awakening. Notice the cobble road that decorates the side here. This is the road to Enolondo. And this is where the pilgrim would learn their fate. They were about to learn that if they rang this bell of awakening, the doors to Enolondo would open up for them. And they would have a chance to live with Gwyn and the other gods in Enolondo. Now just notice these leaves here, kind of hiding out on the side of the bell. As you can see, it was very hard to actually find this detail. And now let's ring the bell of awakening and let everyone else in the other versions of Lordran hear about our victory. And in that simple design choice is the meaning of humanity, and the reason the Knights of Astora took this journey. That need for recognition, that need to let others know their achievements. It is an act of pure humanity and can be heard across the world of humans in the different timelines of Lordran. And how important is it, the ringing of the bell? Well, it depends on how you react to this very simple game mechanic. As you hear the bell yourself, rung by others, does it push you forward in competition? Do you despise it and wish everyone else would just shut up? Or do you not even notice that the bell is ringing and that you focus on your own journey? For me, I find it a gentle reminder that there are others out there enjoying Dark Souls, and that strangely makes me smile. The first thing I noticed when I first got into the remastered version was the bells were ringing constantly, and the number of ghosts and people you would see around the Filing Shrine were huge. It was so different from the time I last played the Prepare to Die edition, where the place was deserted. There are many reasons to make the pilgrimage to the Land of Lords. The sense of community and belonging is one of them, and it is being represented by the Bell of Awakening. And appearing as though from nowhere is Oswald of Carim, the Pardoner. We've met one other character from Carim, and that is Knight Lordran of Carim. Velka has many faces, but she is the goddess of sin. And this is what remains of her religion. Oswald here is a bishop in her service.
Greetings. I am Oswald of Carim, the Pardoner. Thou appearest to lack faith, yet magnanimous are the gods. Cometh thou to confess, or to accuse? For indeed all sins my domain.
What Oswald just said there is very important to the idea of sin in Dark Souls. He will accept your confession, he will accept your accusations, and then he will decide what is sin. The gesture, well, what is it? Shows us what sin is at the end of the world. It seems to be someone weighing up the deeds of a person and judging sin. But when you perform the gesture, it's very sarcastic. It's more like a pro wrestler taunting a person in a ring. At the end of the world, where the gods are missing or dead, sin is only a sin if you get caught, and justice is only for those strong enough to enact it. And that's what we're seeing in Well, What Is It? Oswald of Carim is the last bishop of Velka, and as such, he is a collection of the symbols of Velka. And the first one is the Book of the Guilty. The goddess of sin Velka oversees this list of the guilty, who have disrespected the gods or their covenants, and shall one day face the wrath of the blades of the Dark Moon. And in this item, we are seeing the relationship between Velka and her mother Priscilla. Velka tracks the guilty, while Priscilla goes out and enacts justice against those who are. And here we have the first miracle of Velka, karmic justice, miracle of the black-haired witch Velka. For each sin there is a punishment, and it is the task of Goddess Velka to define the sin and mete out the punishment. These two items seem at odds with one another. In one, the Dark Moon blades are meting out the justice, and here, in this miracle, Velka is doing that. And this is because the items are referring to different points in time. In the era of Nito, in the catacombs, Velka tracked the sins of the living, and her mother, when required, would personally bring justice to those that crossed the gods and threatened the balance of the flame. She may have had followers then, though she would not have needed them, and this is also before she was a god, before Nito gave her part of his Lord Soul. In the era of Astora, when Velka and Priscilla were gods, Velka defined and judged sin as queen in the world below, and her mother watched on from Enolondo. In this era, there were dark wraiths who had red-eye orbs, a gift from Priscilla, and they kept the peace across the timelines by hunting the guilty. Though the dark wraiths ended up going a tad crazy with their powers, and at a later stage the Darkmoon Blades are formed to keep the rogue Dark Wraiths in check. And the Covenants of the Darkmoon Blades and the Covenant of the Dark Wraiths change hands over time, and we'll discuss that later, but they started in Astora, the Dark Wraiths being the first policemen of the multiverse, and then the Darkmoon Blades having to come in later to keep that force in check. And now in the current era that we find ourselves in, the inhabitants of Carim, a kingdom not found in the game, have taken up the mantle of Velka and Priscilla and oversee sin in all its forms. We discussed this back in the first episode with the colours, with the blue being popular in Carim. That is because the inhabitants of Carim are what remains of the Darkmoon Blades. And this is similar to what we found with the people that we met from Tharaland, who took up the mantle of Gwyn and the Way of White, though those people had no power, unlike this partner who has real powers, the powers of the gods. And that's because, unlike Gwyn, Priscilla and Velka are still around and they're still powerful. Gwyn is around, but he's a mere shell of what he once was. And just quickly, if Carim is what remains of the Darkmoon Blades, then Night Lordran of Carim may be from that covenant. Another clue to put on the pile with all the rest, as we try to figure out the nature of the mystery key. So I jumped in the deep end when it came to the symbols of Velka. At the very beginning, I just started stating things like purple and black is associated with Velka, the rats are associated with Velka, and didn't really explain much of that. Now that we've met Oswald of Carim, we can see all the collection of Velka's symbols here. Purple and black, of course, being the colours of the miracle of Velka that we just saw, karmic justice. And here we have Velka's talisman, a talisman that looks like a rat's tail. Velka's talisman, medium for casting miracles of the gods. This black tuft of hair that serves as a talisman belongs to Velka, goddess of sin. It casts miracles not by drawing upon faith, but intelligence. In this one item, the developers are giving us a bunch of symbols of Velka that we can then use to decode the rest of Dark Souls, which we have already used. The black tuft of hair. Black hair is associated with Velka. She is the black-haired witch. This talisman looks like a rat's tail, connecting Velka to the rats that we see in the sewer. And also, the fact that this talisman draws not on faith, but on intelligence. Velka is a creature of pure intelligence, which we can then connect to the candle through the character screen, which we can then connect to the candles, and specifically the black candle that we found in the depths. All of this is coming together with Velka's talisman. Having discussed that, let's move on to the bite rings. The Blood Bite Ring, one of the infamous bite rings commissioned by Sir Oswald of Carim. Despite the dreadful rumours surrounding its creation, the ring is an unmistakable asset in its ability to help prevent bleeding. Firstly, there is the idea that the Blood Bite Ring is commissioned. This is a reference to what is happening in Carim in this era of Lordran. They are a kingdom who has acquired the remains of what power is left in the land. In the character creation screen, the people of Carim are referred to as ominous and dubious, very fitting for those who carry on the traditions of Velka and Priscilla. Those two gods are both very ominous and their acts are quite dubious. And in the fine traditions of those gods, the people of Carim have simply gone and claimed dominion on something that was never meant to be theirs. And this theft is quite brazen. The Dark Son Gwyndolin inherited the Darkmoon Blades from his mother, and is still that Covenant's leader in this era. But here, in the Undead Church, Oswald of Carim mentions none of this, and simply deals in the powers he has acquired, as though they were his own. And next, it mentions dreadful rumours surrounding its creation. This is a cryptic reference to what happened in Astora. This ring would never have been required if Astora had never happened. And now the Ring of Sacrifice. This mystical ring was created in a sacrificial rite of Velka, the goddess of sin. Its wearer will lose nothing upon death, but the ring itself breaks. I mentioned this ring a few episodes ago when we were in the depths, looking at the sewer chamber, and I mentioned this ring was a symbol of Gwyn's sacrifice when he went to relight the first flame and gave up his power to it. This is that ring. Notice the visual design. It is a wet wall, just like we saw in the sewer chamber in Astora, next to the bonfire. So now we know more about the nature of Velka and the nature of Priscilla. We can start to see why those are the two characters you do not want to cross in Lordran, and why they were likely both complicit in the act of giving Gwyn the right of kindling so that he could prolong the life of the first flame, the flame that he burnt out by burning it too bright, by upsetting its balance. And we'll talk more about the Ring of Sacrifice and how it relates to Gwyn a little later as we get more information. And finally, the Purging Stone, ash-coloured stone encasing a skull. Secret treasure of Astor, the Earl of Carim, reduces curse buildup and breaks curse. Humans are helpless against curses and can only redirect their influence. The Purging Stone does not dispel curses, but receives them as a surrogate. The stone itself was a person or some other being. So the last line there is actually a reference to the idea there are humanoid constructs in the world. Something with a skull that is not a person. This could be Solera of Astora, this could be Arturius the Abysswalker, this could be any of those such characters.
Thou art welcome any time. It is only human to commit a sin.
Returning to the idea of the curse, it is a metaphor for the suffering of existence, especially when a person or a special being can no longer affect the world like they once did. This is the weakness of those with humanity in Lordran. Their inability to let go of their power when the time is right. And it is this weakness that forces them to find a surrogate for the curse, and force them to carry on that dying legacy. This is what Gwyn did when he sacrificed himself and made New Londo. His act did not break the curse. He found a group of people or special beings to carry on his way of white, and that's why the Ring of Sacrifice does not break the curse. And that's today's episode. Today we talked about the elite knights of Astora who made pilgrimage from Velka's great city up here to the undead parish to ring the bell of awakening and discover their fate. We also discussed different sacred symbols around the undead parish and discussed how those that remain here are feasting upon those that still come in search of salvation. In the next episode, we'll be seeing New Londo for the first time. And then we'll use the master key for what it was intended for, and that is to bypass Blighttown for now, to descend below and ring the second bell of awakening. Hope to see everybody then. Bye.